Back in May, French President Emmanuel Macron said he envisioned a larger group beyond the European Union. And that idea became a reality with the European political community, which held its first summit in the Czech capital, Prague. Everything facing Europe was on the table, from Russia's attack on Ukraine to the global energy crisis and tensions in the South Caucasus. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan attended the summit, where he met with Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinian. President Erdogan said the full normalization of relations can be achieved and that he expects longtime rivals Armenia and Azerbaijan to reach a peace agreement. Türkiye and Armenia have not had formal diplomatic ties since the 1990s over Armenia's illegal occupation of the Karabakh region. During the summit, Erdogan also said he expects the EU to call on Greece for dialogue. Ankara and Athens have seen tensions rise dramatically this year over maritime disputes and Greece's militarization of islands close to Turkey's coast. So, will the European political community become a new platform, or will it lack the authority of much older groupings like the EU and NATO? And for more on this, I'm joined by Richard Gregosian. He is the director of the Regional Studies Center, a Yerevan-based think tank, and by Talha Köse. He is a professor of political science and international relations at Ibn Haldun University. And he joins me now from Brussels. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. Talha, let me begin with you. What's your opinion on this forum? Were there any breakthroughs?
There are no breakthroughs in this forum. The purpose of the forum is not to reach a broader consensus. However, bringing all the actors, all the EU-affiliated actors together under a critical circumstance to address some of the key issues like energy, security, and economic coordination are important. And also standing stronger in the political crisis and security-related crisis are important. And on the other hand, some of the key issues like Turkey, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and some bilateral discussions were also made to reach further consensus and to increase diplomatic contacts. So in that sense, having this meeting is important. However, it will lead some further talks, further meetings to reach broader consensus and broader policy-related steps.
Yes. So, Richard, what do you think? How directly connected is this forum to the energy crunch hitting Europe amid the Ukraine crisis? And was it a forum directed at Russia?
Well, in many ways, it was important not just for who was there, but for who wasn't there. And obviously, Russia is both distracted and overwhelmed by its failed invasion of Ukraine. But I would respectfully disagree with my co-panelist in that this was a breakthrough from an Armenian perspective. An unprecedented meeting of the Turkish Azerbaijani presidents with the Armenian prime minister.
Yes.
It's not often we come on the show to discuss good news. And I do think it's refreshing, despite everything else that's happening, from a gas crisis to what's going on the ground in Ukraine. And I do think it's a time for statesmanship and for looking forward.
Yes, it's important to note because yesterday Azerbaijan and Armenia have both confirmed their commitment to the Charter of the United Nations as well as the Almaty 1991 declaration, through which both countries recognize each other's territorial integrity and sovereignty. So, Talha, isn't it an important step forward?
Yes, that's a very significant step. We know that there have been ongoing talks between the representatives, special representatives of both Pashinian and President Erdogan. They have agreed on certain issues, and there were some issues, problems, they still stay there. But I think the ongoing talks and this, sincere atmosphere and declarations with regard to willingness to engage diplomatically and address a sustainable solution to this issue. And I think these photos and footages from the videos are very important. This is also giving the world public about possibility of a breakthrough in the coming weeks, maybe months.
So, Richard, we've seen the pictures like three leaders getting together, chatting, and expressing their commitment to a peace. So how is that going to contribute to the peace efforts in the South Caucasus and the normalization of ties first between Azerbaijan and Armenia and then between Armenia and Turkey?
Well, it already has contributed to an environment more conducive to diplomacy over force of arms. On the one hand, it was only 2 years ago where we saw an unprecedented war over Nagorno-Karabakh.
Yes.
And it was only weeks ago when Azerbaijan attacked Armenia. So this represents an important breakthrough and step forward. But you're very correct in identifying that it's two separate tracks: Armenia-Turkey normalization and Armenia-Azerbaijan. And in many ways, neither track moves at the same time. So we do see a welcome return to diplomatic negotiations, but actually we have higher expectations from all parties and all sides. And I am optimistic, but I do think the real practical challenge lies in the details, the implementation of the spirit of goodwill.
Okay, so on the other hand, if we get back to this European political community, Talha, it aims to foster political dialogue, as you've mentioned, and cooperation on issues of common interest to strengthen security, stability, and prosperity of the European continent. What is it for other countries who are not part of the European continent? I mean, why would they contribute to Europe's security, which they are indirectly part of?
Of course, I mean, European community, European political community has broader objectives. One of the key objectives is to keep Europe as a foreign policy and security actor, which was missing due to persistent disagreement among the EU member countries and existence of NATO and disagreements between US and some European countries. So this strengthening the security capacity of EU was one of the priorities for the last couple of years. But with the experience of all these wars, tensions like Ukraine crisis, the EU's efforts to, Europe's efforts to have collective security based on the continent have been weakened, and European countries moved to NATO and US for these purposes. I think this initiative is very important. I mean, the problems that are faced in this continent should be dealt with further cooperation,
yes,
solidarity of European actors. However, this necessitates increasing agreement and bringing autonomous capacity to European actors, which still lacks in this context.
So, Richard, notably and understandably, Russia wasn't there. But why do you think the United States wasn't invited?
Well, I think the United States shouldn't have been invited. In many ways, we're talking about the European Union, a quest for strengthening internal unity, but also stabilizing the European periphery. To be honest, I think the United States is accepted and recognized as a player, but I don't think it would have been appropriate nor necessarily effective. Moreover, I think there was much more progress in having the Turkish president, the Armenian and Azerbaijani, the Moldovan, Georgian presence. In fact, it was more successful outside of the European borders than it was regarding cohesion and unity. But this doesn't mean the US is not committed to the diplomatic process. But it's the EU that has just agreed to deploy monitors to the Armenian-Azerbaijani border, for example. The US is less directly involved.
Well, we actually have been seeing like increased involvement by the US in the normalization process of Armenia and Azerbaijan. But moving back to what you've said, Talha, would you agree with Richard when he said the US should have been invited to this summit or forum? And do you think Europe is going to take charge of its own affairs in the post-Ukraine conflict?
I think one of the of course, US contributes to European security. But if we are going to talk about the European security architecture, I think it is now responsibility of European actors to take their responsibilities on this issue. So every time there is a crisis, every time there is a war, they constantly return to Washington and the NATO, and this distracts their capacity, this distracts their coordination among themselves. So this actually keeps Europe out of the security apparatus, and I think they also need to develop their capacity and return to actor beyond their economic capacities, economic capabilities. So this is very important, and sometimes the European and US interests clash. I mean, in the case of Ukraine war, they have some overlapping interests, but in the issues of security, in the issues of energy, there may be some contradictory issues. And I think in order to become a more reliable partner, more trustworthy partner, European actors should also have their own capacity. It doesn't necessarily mean that they should, contradict with each other or they should compete with each other. But if you sit to the table with a broader capacity, I think you will be taken more seriously both by Washington and the other global actors. So I think it is very important for Europe to develop their own defense capacity and foreign policy capacity.
And during the summit, Richard, Turkey's President Erdogan has also called on the European Union to take the initiative for dialogue with Greece over rising tensions in the Aegean Sea as well as the Eastern Mediterranean. So is there a political will on Europe's side to resolve these contentious issues between neighboring countries, or do European interests outweigh individual interests of the countries?
Well, I would say that's my question for the European Union as well. In other words, from an Armenian perspective, much of the focus in terms of conflict and tension is now on the Aegean. It's with Greece, not in the Caucasus. This is also a demonstration of the problems within the European Union, if not NATO alliance as well. But I do think the fact that the Turkish president decided to attend because there was a question, I do think is a step in the right direction. And I do think that in many ways we need to de-escalate tension in the Aegean, but it's also a test and challenge for the European Union. And on this one, it may be too premature to judge if they're doing enough or if there's sufficient political will.
All right, gentlemen, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.